Welcome to the Narcissist Slayers podcast. We are your co-hosts, Hope Jay
and Lynn Catalano.
Tune in every month as we teach you how to slay the emotional vampire in your life.
Hope Jay is an attorney and founder of the Center for Hope Western New York, a nonprofit organization providing low and no-cost resources to victims of narcissistic abuse. Visit our website at centerforhopewny.org for more information.
And Lynn Catalano is an attorney and a narcissistic abuse recovery coach. She's the author of Wrecking Ball Relationships. Find out more about Lynn at lynncatalano.com. We are both survivors of narcissistic abuse, and we bring our personal experiences and professional expertise to help you on your path to healing.
Please support us by hitting that subscribe button. We are on YouTube and Spotify at the Narcissist Slayers Podcast.
And follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at the Narcissist Slayers Podcast. Send us your questions to narcslayers@centerforhopewny.org.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Together, we will help you slay the narcissist in your life and reclaim your power.
Today, we have a very special guest, Gina Phillips. And Gina is our own certified divorce financial analyst with the Center for Hope of Western New York. And we're very happy to have you back. Thank you for coming on again, Gina.
Thanks for having me again.
So Gina has spent almost 30 years providing auditing and accounting management services to businesses and individuals in corporate, for-profit, and nonprofit sectors. In 2017, Gina became a certified divorce financial analyst, a CDFA, and founded Western New York Divorce Financial Advisors, LLC. Gina acts as a personal liaison between the client and their attorneys and/or divorce mediators, breaking down the often overwhelming process into easily understandable steps. Gina empowers her clients in marital transition to be in control of their financial well-being, giving the clients the peace of mind and confidence that they need to make informed decisions about their future. And oh, how important that is. Drawing on her own experience after a lengthy and emotionally taxing divorce, Gina felt a greater desire to assist similarly situated individuals recovering from narcissistic or abusive relationships. Gina understands firsthand the fears related to financial uncertainties associated with the divorce process. She helps her clients by addressing their fears and helping them create realistic, workable, wealth-building budgets and financial plans to secure their future for themselves and their families. So, since the last time we spoke with Gina, Gina is also now a published author. As part of a compilation titled The Other Side of Divorce, Gina shares her 13 steps to peace after divorce. Now we're going to ask Gina about these steps so that she can share this great information with our listeners. So again, welcome back, Gina. We always love having you on. The information that you have given to our clients and to our listeners is so important. Linda and I were just talking before you got on about how important it is to have that understanding of your financial situation. Yeah. And this is a little bit of a different interview, I think, this time than we normally just, we talk brass tacks, we talk business. Right. And this time we're going to be talking a little bit more about you, Gina, personally. And I'm kind of excited to do that because I think that you have a lot of really great information to offer our listeners. So first and foremost, how did you get involved in this compilation, and why did you decide that this was something that you wanted to do?
I had thought about writing a book for a couple of years now, but I wasn't sure how to get started. And I was fortunate enough to be on a podcast called The D Shift. And after I recorded the podcast, she ended and she goes, "I want you in my book." And she was creating this book. And literally she's like, but you got like 4 weeks to do it. So she goes, "If you want to do this, you can." And, I was really, oh God, it was something that I had thought about, but I didn't know. And she told me the premise. We weren't going into the nitty gritty of the narcissist, the nasty part. We were trying to show people how you can get to the other side.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And, I sat down and I thought about it, and I had been married 13 years before I filed divorce. And right when she asked me to do this in August of last year, I had been officially divorced 13 years.
Oh.
So that's kind of ironic of why I came up with 13 things over my divorce.
That's why.
It has symbolism to me.
Yes.
in a lot of ways. And I think being so far removed from the process even when I started my business, really gave me a different perspective on things. And I think I want to show other people why you're in the nitty-gritty and you're going back and forth and it's emotionally or physically abusive relationship, the only person you can count on is you, and that's going to get you to the other side, and how you process things and the steps you take. And these steps are just suggestions that work for me. And in the book, I mean, the book has a lot of amazing stories. There's someone that started a business because she had special needs children, and she felt the disconnect, and with advocating for them in the divorce process. So there's a lot of wonderful stories. So I feel very honored and blessed that I'm part of the story itself.
Yeah, so it's a bunch of different people in different professions and different walks of life who
From
who
different,
contributed their
yes,
own sort of vignette to the compilation, right?
yes, and there's even people from different countries in there too.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
so it's a really, it's a fascinating book. It is available on Amazon. If you're local to Buffalo and you want to reach out, I have some copies here.
Excellent.
So, Gina, thank you so much for being on again. Um, we do talk about how important all of this information that you share is, especially when you're leaving this type of relationship. But you speak about the importance of finding a good therapist when you're going through this process. Um, what advice can you share with our listeners about finding someone and finding someone who's a good fit for you, and maybe they're just starting on this journey?
Right. I was fortunate that we had been in marriage counseling, and the marriage counselor actually is the one that convinced me to get divorced. He's like, "This isn't going anywhere."
Ah,
So I knew the benefits of counseling. We had been in there for like 9 months, and he goes, he recommended somebody, but he said, research it. And I think the biggest thing is, you can go off a recommendation of other professional people, doctors or even friends, maybe friends that have been in a similar circumstance, but you have to own it when you go in the first time. You have to make sure that person jives with you. Um, and I think with me, it just worked because, in my therapy wasn't really pushed in my family. I had started my son on the therapy process because of his age too. So he had gone through 3 different therapists. So I know the importance of finding the right one to help you get past the issues that you have. So I think you just have to be open-minded, and you have to look at it from the perspective of, this is somebody that's an outsider looking in. So there's no blame to be blamed. It's not one person's fault. Maybe there's things how you can handle circumstances and everything, but it's not a friend or a family member who have might seen things. Now this is somebody else that's been trained and can help you get past what that is you need to get past. I mean, for me, I had been a stay-at-home mom for like 7 years. I had been out of the workforce. I had wrapped my whole life around my son and my ex-husband, and I lost who Gina was and what Gina wanted.
Yeah.
if I could just add, Gina, we are all affiliated providers with the Center for Hope. And so I would brag that the therapists that we have as affiliated providers are so knowledgeable about this type of toxic relationship from a narcissist. So I would actually add that you should look at our website as well.
Oh, I
Yes.
definitely agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think, we actually touched on this topic with our last guest last month when we were talking to Dr. Jill Wise, and she had also talked about why it's so important to find, and actually how working with the wrong therapist could harm you and make you have a setback. So I find it interesting that that was pretty much like your number one. I think that was your number one step, that finding a therapist and working with a therapist. There's no shame. Anybody who maybe has been raised with the idea that seeking therapy means you're weak, or that there's absolutely no shame. It's a really important step toward self awareness and self growth, and it's like I always say, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can be there to help your kids and, other people that are going to be going through this process with you. So one of the other things that you talk about, and this is something that I don't think that we've talked a lot. We've interviewed lots of different people on this topic, and I don't think that anybody's ever brought this up before. And I agree with you 1,000,000,000% on this. So you talk about starting an exercise routine, and why getting up and moving is an important part of this journey, and absolutely. I'm interested in your reasons why and why you believe that. But also, I think for a lot of people, you just mentioned, I was a stay-at-home mom. I kind of lost myself. I'm doing for everyone else. And a lot of us are like that. A lot of us are people who don't put ourselves first. We don't put our needs first. We're codependent. We're taking care of everybody else's needs. So this might be the first time that we're kind of suddenly looking at what do I need? And maybe we haven't been somebody that's had a good routine for physical fitness. So I'm interested in your thoughts also on how do you get motivated? Like, how do you start? Okay.
Yeah. Well, in fact, when I first started my exercise journey, it was kind of related to my ex-husband because he was like, you need to lose weight, you need to get
Mm,
in better shape. And then when I was going through the divorce, I realized that I wasn't doing it for him because that didn't keep our marriage together. I was doing it for me. Getting up and go at the time I was fortunate enough to have like a personal trainer and did all that stuff, but I knew I couldn't afford that much longer after the divorce. So I had to be my own self motivator. But
mm,
I think just getting up and moving and not just sitting and thinking and for me it could be as simple as taking a little walk in nature
mhm.
or going to a mall and walking around a mall and just being stimulated by other people. Exercise provides you with natural endorphins,
Yeah.
okay? And it could be riding a bike. It could be learning to go ballroom dancing.
Yes.
Anything that gets you moving, that interest yourself is good for the soul. I mean, I think we all focus on, we got to make money, we got to do this, and we got to do that, but you've got to take care of the vessel you're in. And if you
Yeah.
don't exercise and you don't, you know, it's hard to sometimes get out of bed early and go for a walk and or do things like that, but the rewards are you feel better, and even going to a gym. A gym might be a good place to meet other people,
Yeah.
especially when you've been in a limited environment. You start I just was watching something where somebody was working out at the gym and they were both going through divorces and talking on the treadmill. And 9 years later, they're together. Like I saw a story online or something about that. So you don't know where your next opportunity comes to. And being physically fit is going to help you and to not just move on for yourself, but for your children. So you're there for them if there are children involved in the situation.
Gina, I love what you said about I didn't, I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it for me
Yeah.
because I think that a lot of times and the fact that you're like you need to lose weight, like that is such a typical comment from an abuser, to try to demolish your self-esteem. So doing it for you is, I think, the key. You're not doing it for somebody else, you're doing it for your health. And one of the benefits is that you're probably going to, look better, feel better, all that kind of stuff. I just have to add, that for me, I found the Peloton. And I don't, I'm not, this isn't a commercial for Peloton or anything, but
We are not
I,
sponsored.
what's that?
We would like to be. We're
We'd
not
love to be
sponsored,
sponsored,
but we'd
but
love to.
I'm going to just give a shout out to the Peloton because, I found a way to incorporate that regular physical exercise with a community. It's an online community, but I think for a lot of people, the gym thing might be challenging. And if you're able to do it in your home and to find a way to do it in your home, the Peloton absolutely rocks. I've never stuck with anything this long, this consistently. I'll be honest, I never have. So it's a good option.
I agree. I think exercise is actually a form of self-care when you're going
Yes.
through this type of relationship. So I completely agree. But Gina, I want to talk about something that so many of my clients come to me at this place. And I love that your number 3 on your list is knowing my number. And certainly, for you, this became your future career. But
Right.
I'd love for you to explain to all of our listeners why it's so incredibly critically important that women know their numbers, during the marriage and during the divorce,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. And it kind of goes back to even my story. I had the accounting degree. My ex-husband was very busy in his business. I took care of the daily finances. And he was commission based. So it was planning, and it was doing all those things. Um but then when I went through the divorce, I realized he was actually kind of concealing some money from me too.
Mm.
And I was like, me, an accountant who was looking at the numbers all the day, how could that happen to me, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I took a step back and I really looked at, what was I spending my money on? What was I doing? Was it always bringing me joy? Was it not bringing me joy? Did it add to my happiness, and all those things? And when you go through the divorce process, as Hope knows in New York State, it's a 23-page document you have to fill out.
Mm.
With Even with my accounting degree, was overwhelming. And then when I had a couple of my girlfriends trying to do it, they were totally lost. I mean, they were like, what do I do? Do I put, do I estimate higher? Do I do it lower? What can I possibly live on? And I don't care, even if you're in the marriage, you need to know what's going on with the marital assets. And I know people say, well, I have my bank account and he has his bank account, but it doesn't matter, because if you don't share the same philosophy on how you spend your money and your time, that's not going to contribute to helping your marriage either, if you're still in a marriage. And if you go through a divorce, you really have to know and have a clear picture of what can you afford in your future. Because maybe you're used to the country club and the fancy cars and going out to the nice restaurants, but that might not be feasible when you go through it.
Right.
And I think with me, I do this every month. Like, sometimes knowing what I have to pay the next month calms me down, because I know I have the ability to do it. Or, okay, I need to, maybe go out to one less dinner. Or, maybe I don't need that new shirt, or whatever. But I think when you have a clear understanding, having financial stability gives you power. Okay? It gives you control and power over what you can do.
Mm.
That's in my opinion, and that's why I can help people really look at that and what's important to people.
So, Gina, I mean, just to dig a little bit deeper on this, because I mean, this is your area of expertise, and I don't want to gloss over it because I think you have some great information to share. When you're dealing with women who are coming out of abusive relationships like this, and as Lynn just said, and because we work together all the time, financial abuse is a major issue in these kinds of relationships. So I think when you're like, if I always think to myself, what bit of advice would I give a young woman? My daughter's about to be married in 2 weeks. Okay. What bit of advice would you give a young woman who's starting out her life, and, you know, how to protect herself? And I know that, most of us don't want to look at marriage that way, like that we go into a marriage needing to protect ourselves. But maybe we're all a little too experienced in life at this point to not look at life
Right.
that way.
Right.
And I'm interested in like what you would say to a young woman in her 20s, about how she should think about money in a marriage. Okay. And also, um if you could piggyback on that just a little bit more, because I've had this happen a couple of different times where I have had these young women come into my office on the eve of their marriage, and I'm not even kidding you, the eve of their marriage, like the day before, where these abusers are forcing them into signing a prenup. And to me, that kind of like when someone pulls something like that on you, the eve before your marriage, I look at these young women and I want to tell them to run because, those are red flags. Like I think there's some of this stuff that you can see with somebody who's going to be financially controlling. What are some of the things that you would tell somebody to be on the lookout for? So that's sort of a general question, but all of those
Right.
kinds of things, you know?
So if I find out somebody's getting married, I say two things. Two
Okay.
things. I said right off the bat. I say, if you have a 401k, print it and put it in a safe deposit box so you know what you had when you started the marriage.
Ah,
And two,
good
not that you
advice.
want
I'm about to
to,
pass that on.
okay. And then two, if you inherit any money, keep it separate. Keep the house separate. If you inherit in a house, keep it separate. If you inherit 100,000 and want to take 20,000 to do a kitchen in your house, take the 20. Don't put it in
Yes.
commingle.
Yes.
Keep that yours, okay? And it
Fantastic
could be
advice.
as little as $5,000, anything. I got inherited some stock from my grandfather when my son was 5. 5 years later, I had kept it separate. I got to take it. You know what I mean? And that was empowering me that didn't go to to my ex-husband.
That's not considered community property. I just want to
Right.
Correct. Or if you had
If
a
you haven't
lawsuit or
commingled it with the marital funds. And that is fantastic advice, Gina. I can't tell you how many times I want to cry when women walk into my office and they've done just that. And they've put 100,000, 200,000 into a marital asset. The marriage implodes, and then they've lost half of that. So that is the fantastic advice.
and I think you need you before you say yes and plan this elaborate wedding, you really need to sit down and have a conversation with your future spouse
Mm.
and really understand how are you going to deal with finances. I think it's important even if you decide to keep like a separate bank account like because you don't want them to know how much you're paying for that purse or something like that. I'm not saying, because you don't, or he goes on a golf weekend or whatever. I think you need to have a discussion on how you handle money.
It
You
should be
know,
tr- it should be transparent, right, Gina? Because
it should be.
and if it's not, if you feel like that someone is ducking, dodging, hiding things like off the bat, forcing you, like I said, to sign a prenup when it's coming out of the blue, what would you say to those women?
I just had a friend who 2 days before she got married signed a prenup and now she's divorced
Ah,
and she's older. If she would have waited till she was 60, it would have been better if she wasn't forced to do that.
Well,
And I mean, if you come from, someone that has a lot of money and that's standard in their family, that might be okay. But get a lawyer that knows prenups.
right.
Don't be forced. If they come to you the week before the wedding, that's a big red flag to
Big
me.
red
That's
flag. That's something that
big.
should have been disclosed early on, should have been
Right,
discussed. And
exactly.
and I'm not against prenups.
No,
I don't want you to, I think prenups are a very smart idea and should, like you said, fully discussed, full disclosure, all that kind of stuff.
a
I'm
list of
talking
the
about the sneak
assets.
attack. The sneak
Right.
attack.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
well, like even this one, it said there was a Schedule A of all his assets. There was no Schedule A. I'm like, well, why can't, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but it was, she didn't really care. She just wants to get out. But what she got for 10 years of marriage is disgusting. Do you know what I mean? It's terrible. But I think the biggest thing is no matter if you're in a marriage or a partnership, you really need to have that discussion about money.
Yeah.
Because even myself, after my marriage, I was with a partner and we never commingled anything or lived together, but our philosophies about money were completely and totally different. And that contributed, well, he was a narcissist too, but that contributed to, me kind of taking a step back. And, you know, I think that financial stability, you don't have to be a millionaire, but to know, like I said, go back to knowing your numbers and everything, you really need to have the same philosophy of how you spend your money.
And the thing, I think the last thing before we transition that I would say to anybody that's listening is if you're afraid to broach this topic, if you fear the consequences from your partner to talk to bring up, money and talk about money, and that this is something that, you feel sick in your stomach about, because I know that's an issue, then my strong advice to any woman who feels that way is to go to a counselor, like ASAP, like call the Center for Hope or find a good counselor and work through that, because it's your internal warning system is trying to tell you something. Um,
You
yeah.
know, my mother told me, and I feel like this is such a great foundation for healthy relationships. She told me that you never joke about sex, money, or religion. And
Mm,
I think that if you go into a relationship with full transparency on those three particular items, I think obviously everything should be full transparency, but those three, and you know that there's no joking about that. When you talk about those subjects, it's a serious time. I think that there would be so many conflicts would be avoided. I think
mm,
people need to recognize that. But I hope what you're saying is if someone is afraid to bring up
yeah.
money to the other person, I think that is a huge red flag not to get married.
Oh,
Do not get married.
right.
Like,
Yeah.
put the brakes on,
Yeah.
Or
My
if they're controlling how much like if you're working and they're working and say, "Oh, you only get an allowance," or
no,
yeah,
no, man.
Yeah.
you've got to have goals as partners of what you want to spend your money and time on. And
Right.
I think if you don't, plan accordingly, and Hope and I have seen it. We've seen it where some of our clients have so much money in retirement and they don't have enough money to buy a house, or
Yeah.
and it's because of the philosophy of the one of the spouses
Right.
and how they control. That's a form of control.
Right.
So I think that to help your own self to be able to really live on, have that self self-preservation, I guess is the better word, just to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Please know your numbers if you're single, in a partnership, or in a marriage.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you for that, Gina.
Thank you.
So we're going to transition to some of the other
Yeah.
topics that you talked about in your portion of the book. You talk about finding a support system when recovering from narcissistic abuse, and Lynn and I talk about that a lot on this
Uh,
podcast. But you call it meeting my tribe. So, how did you find your tribe while going through your divorce, and why is it so important to have the support system in your life post divorce?
I was very fortunate that I was just starting, and I just opened up to somebody I barely knew, and she's like, "Oh my god, I'm going through the same thing, and you got to meet my friend." And we all had sons that were the same age. We all lived within a 2-mile radius. It was like for us to meet. We were all like stay-at-home moms at the time, and it was so nice to be able to talk to somebody that was experiencing the same thing that I was, and at first, it was let's go to lunch, let's do this. And then we started saying, okay, we can't just keep doing the same things, and we started going out because we all like to listen to music. And we were fortunate to start meeting individuals that like, well, we're going here, and they would send a text message. And I am happy to say and fortunate to say that 16 years later, after I started that process, 95% of those people are still my friends, and we still get together for different things. And all of us, one of the things we all have in common is we were divorced. Now, when
Yes.
I went through it, I had younger children. Some of them were old, most of them were older than me. I'm one of the younger ones. So they had already been through dividing holidays and been through the divorce process and everything else. And I learned to depend on those people to even help me out in certain circumstances. I have so many, you know, you know, friends that I could say, "Oh my God, I need a," like when we were going through this, we would help each other by watching each other's kids even. if we had an appointment or something like that, where, the husband wasn't coming through, somebody had a teenage daughter, she would babysit. So we've helped each other so many times along the way. And during the course of that, I realized that it's never late to make friends, because like all my friends were related to my son and my ex-husband, just because of the circumstances I was in. And you got to sometimes adjust your tribe too. I think that's important too. You don't want to be with people that all they do is sit there and say, "Oh, is me. I've been through a bad divorce." And they're repeating the same thing. You've got to be with people that empower you to do different things. For me, it was I remember one year I went to the fair. I had never been to the fair, and saw Demolition Derby. And I would have never done that, with my ex-husband. But it was something different. I'm just using that as an example because if you bond with people, you will enjoy things they do and they will enjoy things you do. And from those people, especially when my divorce was final, some of them were professional people, and I met an estate planner, I met a mortgage broker, so they could vet the people for me. So I think having that synergy with people around you and that comfort is really great. And I feel so blessed that I met those people. I mean, it was just meant for me to meet those people. And my one friend is like we're definitely have been through a lot together. And I don't know what my life, our whole lives would have been different if we didn't have that that close camaraderie to help each other out, I think.
I think that's incredible, and that's a great message to send to our listeners. Not only divorce, but certainly any kind of relationship where there's emotional abuse is so isolating. And that's what we really talk about is the fact that you feel disconnected from anyone that was part of your tribe before the relationship. And so I think this is such a great message, Gina. So thank you. Thank you for that. On that line, this is not something I don't think we've ever talked about this, but I know Hope and I both have this, so I think it's obviously very important to us. But you mentioned that getting an animal companion, specifically a dog, really helped you and changed your life for the better. Now, I lifelong animal lover, Hope as well, but please share with us, why do you recommend this to others?
Well, I for me, it was my son always I grew up with animals too, but my ex-husband got allergic. He did have animals, but then he got allergic. So I remember my son approaching me and saying, like a month before we even said we were getting divorced, saying, "Mom, look on the bright side. If you and Daddy get a divorce, we can get a puppy." Okay, so that's my 10-year-old trying to look on the brighter side. So originally I was getting the dog for him. But, being in that house alone on the weekends when he was with his dad,
Mm.
it was a form of, and I've always had big dogs. So like I had a 100-pound German Shepherd, and now I have a 90-pound rescue, and just having something else to take care of was good for me. And they can sense things, if I was sitting there crying, my first dog would just get his head and put my hand and,
Oh,
and just want me to pet him, and this dog, he's hilarious. He if he hears me yelling on a Zoom call, he'll come up and start licking me. You know what I mean? So I think that when you have synergy with your animals, it just really, I don't know, it was something else to take care of. Plus, it helps me exercise. Like
Mm.
I
All
have to
tied
take the
together.
dog
Yeah.
for
Yep.
all I have to take the dog. Now, mind you, it's expensive. You have to have, sometimes it's expensive to have an animal. But the unconditional love, which you heard my dog barking at earlier in the podcast, and everything, it's just that feeling you've got something else, to take care of. And this one's a cuddle bug. He climbs up on my lap and is just, he's just really, really good with people. But and I know people that I just was talking to a woman who's just went through a divorce. She never had animals, and her ex-husband they had got cats, and he didn't want the cats. And she said, "I don't know what my life would be like now if I didn't have my cats," you
Oh,
know?
oh,
So I think it gives you something to take care of.
yeah.
Uh,
You're so right.
Mm,
I think that goes for, for any transition, right?
right,
The empty nest transition,
right,
right? When your kids leave,
right.
like, so you're right. You get unconditional love, and I just read an article that people who have dogs get in so many more steps because of walking your dogs that it actually extends your lifespan. So
Yeah,
there's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's all the upside for
yep.
yeah,
to getting a
yeah.
dog.
No, yeah.
But so one of the other things, and I think all these topics are kind of related. One of the other things that you bring up is self-care, and I think, like Lynn said, exercise is self-care. Um, but you give a lot of different examples. You talk about setting up a routine, spending time with friends, but you also spend a little bit of time talking about something that you call the woo-woo stuff. Woo woo.
Woo.
WOOWOO.
Yeah,
And
well,
I just loved that so much. I'm like, okay. So Gina, tell our listeners, what's the woo woo stuff that they should
okay,
be thinking
so
about?
so and I talk in my chapter 2 about my religion, which I'm still very faithful in my religion. But when you go through something as traumatic as a divorce, and when it comes and blindsides you and you really don't know, you kind of try to explore other things. And I remember one of my friends, "Oh, you need to go to a psychic." And I was like, "Okay." But I did it, and she told me some valuable information about my divorce, which really helped me in the process. And then I started, my body was aching and different things. So I explored. One of my friends took a Reiki class, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what the heck it was. Reiki, energy
Right.
healing, everything. And she was going through divorce, and I was going through divorce, and we went away for the weekend in Chicago. We got snowed in. So one time she goes, "Can I practice Reiki on you?" And I'm like, "Okay, why not? I'll try anything." And I could feel parts of my body where my throat chakra, she's like, "Your throat chakra is blocked." Well, that would make sense, when you're going through a divorce,
Yeah.
and how your body aligns, and you hold on to certain energies in your body. That's what the Reiki is. Actually, last night I went for a sound healing. So I do all kinds of different things. Sound healing is using sound, to release things in your body, and the vibration of the sound can, jar different parts of your body. I've done feng shui. I've done a lot of things to just explore in a self-care perspective of, meditation. uh you know I like to walk and meditate, kind of, when I'm walking in nature. That's really important to me, or being by water, that kind of grounds me. So I think it's what can make you feel good about yourself too. Feng shui is moving things around in the house, and I know, I mean, some people don't want to look into the woo woo stuff. Some people find it intriguing, and that's all they do. I do like a combination of both. I do what makes me feel happy.
I think it's great advice, Gina. We actually have a holistic arm to the Center for Hope. Because when we think about like this continual sort of way to support yourself through recovery from a relationship like this, I agree with you 100%. I mean, that holistic piece, the meditation, the mind body, the energy healing, all of that. Right now, we have a informed massage therapist who just joined us. So absolutely. And thank you for sharing that.
I agree completely. I talk about a lot of somatic stuff when I coach people, talk about sleeping and the importance of breathing exercises and meditation and mindfulness and all this stuff. It's almost things that we overlooked. We were too
Yeah.
serious, pursuing whatever we were, and we weren't paying attention to that. And I think it is holistic because it is looking
Mhm.
at the whole body. So I think it is so important. Gina, you talk about buying your first home as a pivotal moment after, well, as a pivotal moment for you, regardless of when it happened, but it happened to have happened after the divorce. Whether you buy or rent, your first space after a divorce is certainly a meaningful first step. So, can you share why this was so important to you and what it meant in your life?
So I basically went from my parents' house to being married to a house. And then we had built a house where my son needed to be raised to stay in the school district and everything like that. And I was approaching that, you know, could I have stayed in that house a little longer? Yes. But I was looking at it again from the financial stability side and what I wanted to do. And it took me a year to kind of figure out where I wanted to go. I knew my son was going off to college. I knew I didn't need this. Oh God, I had a big house, 31 square foot house, in a great school district and but I didn't need to keep getting my lawn done and I couldn't walk anywhere. And that's what I love to do is to walk. So I looked around, I looked in the city that wasn't for me, in Western New York. And then I figured out where I wanted to be in the, where I'm living now in the village of Williamsville. I looked at like 100 houses here. Like
Wow.
in 6 months, it was a different time with the market and everything because we're going back now 2015, 2016. And the house I bought, I never thought I would. I thought maybe a ranch or this or that. But when I walked in it, it just felt like home.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And I know not everybody can afford, you're selling the big house
Yeah.
and maybe you need to move into an apartment temporary, or maybe it's the best thing for you. I mean, I know rent's expensive, but your refrigerator breaks and you're in an apartment, you call the landlord, So you have to do what's best for you. And for me, I've got the best of both worlds because I walk a half a block and there's a bunch of restaurants and boutiques. I walk the other way and there's a natural falls. So I mean like I couldn't live in a better location for what my needs are right now. And just having to make the decisions, I redid this whole house, but picking out the paint color, picking out my own furniture, that was very empowering for me because it
Very.
wasn't what my parents told me. It wasn't what my husband was telling me.
Yes.
It was my choices. Hanging what I wanted to hang on the walls
These
even.
are all huge things. I mean, don't minimize it. For women coming out of abusive relationships, these are huge, huge things.
Yes.
I remember speaking to somebody that her husband moved out and she redid her bedroom in the house. And I go, oh, that is so amazing. Because sometimes I was fortunate in the house that we lived in. He only lived in the house like 10 months and then he left. I mean, we had built the house and then he left. But my son never felt like that was a home for him. He's even said that to me. This feels more like a home.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's important. It's not how the size is. It's what you make it feel for yourself.
Yeah.
And for your kids. I always tell people that when they're
Yeah.
grieving, leaving the big house, it's like your kids don't care about that.
Right.
What your kids care about is feeling safe and being with you. So anywhere you are is home for your children.
Important.
So Gina, we have one last question for you. This is kind of a big question, but it's how you end your chapter. You talk about finding your purpose, and finding your purpose. I think is something that most of us struggle with, especially after leaving an abusive relationship. So if you could share, and I know this is again, it's a big question, but if you could share with our listeners how you did find your way back and put your pain to power like you did.
Well, thank you. For me, during the divorce, my divorce took over 3 years. That's a long time.
Yes.
Okay. It's a very long time. So my son was 10 when we started. He was 13. He was going into middle school when we finalized he was going into high school. So that's a long time.
It
And
is a
and
long
the
time.
lawyers say don't start working, but I was going crazy. And I went back to work in a normal quote accounting job and then I worked my way up and I was a business manager and I had a decent job. But I always said when I was going through this divorce, and I asked my friend this because she's been through the process with me. She goes, Gina, you must have said it 150 times. There's got to be something better. I got to do something. I'm going to start a business. I just didn't know what it was because I didn't know about a CDFA. The first one in our area was like 2010. My divorce started in 2008.
Right.
Okay. So a lot of people don't know that we're out there to help and guide people. And they're like, oh, I got a lawyer. Oh, I got that. I look at things completely different. I'm not going to I'm just going to help you really assess your numbers.
Right.
And I remember I was struggling in my job, and it was somebody in my tribe who was a financial planner. And he's like, "Do you know about this certification?" I said, "No." And he's like, "You really need to look into it." And I was scared, okay, to quit a job.
Yeah, that's
And
scary.
actually I had just bought this house, I had downsized and everything. And I remember I was really struggling and I went to a meditation. I actually did. I went through a meditation. It was a sound meditation. And I woke up from that and I knew I had to do this. I just knew that I had to take everything that I experienced, the hidden bank account, the lie, the things that were done to me, and make it better for somebody else. Now, mind you, when I started this, I started in 2017. My divorce, it was a period of time. So I had healed enough to help people. But every time I hear a story, and every story is different, I really say, okay, now what is the best thing I can do to help this person not make some of the mistakes I made? I mean, like, I never thought about car insurance and it just different things financially, or properly writing your retirement assets. A lot of people don't even realize that, oh yeah, we're going to divide the retirement assets and we need four different things. So I try to really take the lessons that I've learned so that people don't make the same mistakes. And I'll tell you, when I get a compliment from a male or a female, about how I help them and how they just feel better or more empowered, that's the best gift. That
Yeah.
is the best gift. I just want to help people really live their best life.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think
Great.
that I know our clients are the better for it. I can vouch for Gina because I work with Gina very closely. We've worked together on a number of cases. She's fantastic. If anybody listening wants to get in touch with Gina, you can go right to our website at centerforhopewny.org and ask for a consultation with Gina. I don't know if everyone's aware of this, but we do 30-minute no cost consultations for anybody that is interested in meeting with any of our affiliated providers. But Gina, if anybody wants to buy this book, how do they find the book and where should they look?
It is on Amazon, but if you're local to the Western New York area, I do have some copies available for purchase. So if you want to get it quicker or whatever, you could send me an email at gina@wndfA.com and I'll help
Okay.
you get it if you're local to Western New York. And if you're local to Western New York, I'll even sign it for you.
All right.
Very good.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
So
Well,
thank you
thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Thank
Again, so
you.
much for coming on it today. The information that you shared is so important to our listeners. And yeah, so we'll see you next time on the Narcissist Layers.